Day. We welcome now to the program Sam Valentine and Ed Legrand, Life Directors, the Mississippi Retired Public Employees Association. Sam, Ed, thanks for coming in.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Glad to join you.
Yes, sir. So first, tell the folks, just to make sure we understand the distinction between your association and, of course, the PERS organization, the PERS board itself. You're on the board of the Association of the Retired Members of PERS, correct?
That is correct, and we're the association that represents all participants in the public employees retirement system, active employees, retired employees, and those people that intend to come into public service in the future.
Okay. So the reason we wanted you to come in, something that is, I just told the speaker that maybe has gotten more attention and more activity than perhaps any issue, any matter I can think of that has been deliberated under the dome there, and that is this bill introduced in the House that is now died over in the Senate. It died last week, I believe, but this bill would have restructured the PERS board, which currently consists of 8 elected members and the state treasurer and then 1 appointed by the governor. It would have increased the number to 11, of which 7 of those members would be appointed, 4 by the governor, 3 the lieutenant governor, and then 2 would be elected by the PERS membership. So the board would be significantly overhauled, and that caused a lot of concern, shall we say, for the PERS membership. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I think it caused a tremendous amount of concern, and I think we got everybody's attention on what those concerns are. You know, you basically would create a monopoly of appointed officials running the public employees retirement system rather than the board as it's currently constituted. And if you go back and look at the track record of the current sitting board, you know, we range up in the 98th percentile on performance. The management fees that occasionally get brought up as being excessive, if you look at the amount of money in the portfolio to the tune of about $32 billion, $100 million is 0.03% of that portfolio. So I don't know that you can really consider that excessive. And if you compare it to our peer group, which is pension funds of $10 billion or more, we're right up there, 97, 98% in that category as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I've actually done some research on that as well as to what typical load, that would be the fees you pay to the investment consultants. And typically it's in the 0.2 to 1% range. So you're right in the range, actually on the lower end of the range.
Right.
That amounts to about $100 million a year. I think that's what gets folks' attention is it's $100 million, which is certainly a lot of money, but it's not when you consider that it's a $32 billion portfolio, and that's a very complex matter to manage a $32 billion portfolio. I agree with that.
Sure, and, you know, the reason it seems like so much money is we're just not accustomed as individuals in dealing with those kind of figures.
That's right. It's right. It's 3 basis points is the way they refer to that.
That's correct. It's calculated in basis points, which is the hundredths of a percent.
That's exactly right. That's the financial lingo there. So I've never really thought that's out of line. I have heard some people that have just pointed out that it's a lot of money. So when I interviewed Director Higgins and Chairman of the Board, Bill Pinson, I point blank asked them what the procurement process is for awarding that contract to the money managers. And it seems to be fairly comprehensive and consistent with good procurement practices. As you guys know, there aren't a lot of companies that will take on the management of a public pension portfolio. There are not many. There's not many defined benefit plans left, honestly, except in the public sector. So the pool of candidates is kind of dwindled. But let's take a look. So you look at that, the returns, as you indicate, have been quite strong, honestly, relative to other states. They've not been out of line. I think the data I looked at, about 7.8% or so over 30 years. I think even around 8.5%, 9% over the last 10, 15 years. Is that the numbers you guys?
That's close,
yep.
exactly.
Okay, so that I think that's in line, and I've actually advised the legislature, don't expect just because you reconstitute this board that they're going to magically go improve the investment return.
Good advice.
On the other hand, I'll point this out to you and see what you think, is that it wasn't so long ago that the board reported, this is what I've heard from legislators, especially on the Senate side, the board reported that the plan was overall in pretty good shape from a funding ratio perspective, and then a short year later came back and said that it had decreased significantly, this according to the actuaries, and there was, I think, some head-scratching going on there. What do you guys know about that? Sam?
I can't respond to that. I would say that it probably had to do with the actuary's report.
It did.
One of the things that has changed actuarially is that assumed rate of return. They suddenly popped that information out there, and we have to go with what the actuary says.
Yeah.
But when they lowered that, that added a significant amount to unfunded liability. It's one fatal swoop of the pen there. But we have to abide by what the actuary said, at least the board does.
So it went from 7.75 to 7.5, now down to 7, and that was one of the questions raised by Senator Sparks during the hearing in the Senate. In fact, I can't remember which one of the board members that he was addressing at the time, but this particular board member, it may have been McCoy, said he actually voted against reducing the target rate of return.
That's right. There was some disagreement there among board members.
Yeah. So, and he even admitted, though, on the program, and I talked to him privately about it as well, I said, well, who's to say what the correct target rate of return is? But we know, because you're trying to project risk in the future, that's the actuarial process, you have to plug that into the formula.
That's right.
You could say, hey, let's make it 10, and then the problem goes away, but then you got a problem of trying to achieve 10.
But what scared everybody is that when they dropped it from 7.5 to 7%, it increased the unfunded liability between $5 and $6 billion.
That's right.
That got everybody's attention.
It did. I mean, but even, I think, Ed, you'd admit, even at a $19 billion unfunded clip, that's concerning. It
is.
Yeah. So we went up when we dropped the rate of return to, about $25 billion.
Yeah, but I would point out, if you take the amount of money that became unfunded liability when the legislature did the benefit enhancement back in the late 90s, early 2000, 20% of that unfunded liability is directly associated with those benefits.
Yep.
So then you take that amount of money, and then if you pull out of the equation the rate of return drop to 7%, all of a sudden you have an unfunded liability that's very well managed and pushes us back up there into the 75, 80th percentile of all public pension funds in this country.
Yeah. So, but to be clear, though, in spite of that, as you guys know, the PERS board recommended increases in the employer. Actually, they enacted increases in the employer contribution rate because they do have that power.
That is correct.
The actuaries, I believe, recommended 10% over a 6-year period, and I think what was enacted by the board was 5% over 3 years. And so it does kind of make you wonder, well, if we sort of recalculated the unfunded liability and took a different view of that mathematically, do we really need to do this? Because it feels a little permanent when you start imposing that.
I think one of the things about that hasn't been noted, that is the only thing that the board could do.
I have noted it. I agree.
And they don't have the power to reach out and grab an appropriation or set a special fee on gaming or anything. All they can do is increase it. So they did what they could do based on what the actuary suggested. From the standpoint of the cities, they're concerned. I understand that. I live in a little small town up there in Leake County. I've talked to our mayor about it. I've talked to other mayors about it. It put a squeeze on them. We understand that. But that was the only thing the board could do to address what the actuary reported to them.
Yeah. And as we said, I think you're aware the actuaries wanted more. They recommended 10, and the board just acted on 5, half of that essentially. Yeah. But you're right. The two main, we got a break. We'll come back after this. But the two main powers they have are the employer contribution rate and the target rate of return on the investment portfolio.
Right. And they're working that good. I think they're doing a good job of that.
Okay. They can't change benefits. We want to make that clear.
That's right.
Only the folks under that dome have the power to change benefits.
That's exactly who can change benefits, and only who can change it.
Got it. All right. We're coming right back. We've got Sam Valentine and Ed Legrand from PERS in the Element Wealth Studio. Stay with us. We're visiting with Sam Valentine and Ed Legrand. They are directors of the Mississippi Retired Public Employees Association. Of course, longtime members of PERS, both as active and retired members. So we're just talking about what to do here in the state of Mississippi with this unfunded liability that the PERS fund is facing. I just wonder, Sam, off air there, we were just talking about kind of how we got here. And a lot of this goes back to some decisions made a long time ago, honestly. Yeah. And we can't undo those at this point. We just sort of got the hand that dealt to us, and we got to address it.
Yeah. When you get looking back into the end of the, I guess it was about 1999, somewhere along in there, they enacted a lot of expansion of benefits. And you say, well, why did they do that? Our board had a long run of good returns. We were looking at double-digit returns, and I think they took the attitude, that board's doing so great, they won't ever stop making money. But anytime that market goes up, you can bet it's going to go down at some point in time, and that's part of it. But when you look back on that, they increased our unfunded liability by about 40 years. Well, all the benefit expansions they did in that short window of time from July 1 of 98 to July 1 of 2002, that's a lot of expansion of benefits. It included a retroactive increase of benefits to everybody that ever been retired. It included some increases, I think, in SLRP, Special Legislative Retirement Plan. That was the time to do it, I guess, is when you're having a great return. Unfunded liability looked great, and suddenly after this, it didn't look so great. So that's where we're at. You
know, even in business, there's always a risk when you commit to permanent long-term expenses based on sort of short-term spikes in revenue. And even though that may have been a little bit more than short-term, as you indicate, though, investments are a long game.
Yeah.
And you can't rely on something that's a little off the mean somewhat, more than a deviation or so, and say, oh, yeah, that's where we're going to stay permanently, and we can make all these adjustments.
And when you're a board dealing with a pension fund of this type, you've got to take the long-term horizon. You've got to look 40 years and 30 years out, and that's exactly what your actuary does.
They do.
He says, where are you going to be? This is how much money you need to be at that point 30 years out, and that's what he's doing, and he's guiding them. And they got a good actuary. You know, I don't fault the actuary. They're using one of the best. He's one of the biggest in the country, so I'll buy what he says, although I may not like it. I mean, I said something to the speaker earlier. I said, looking at changing that anticipated rate of return, we should have put that out probably another year before we talked about it. But the actuary said we talk about it now, and that's exactly what they're doing.
So, Ed, one of the grievances, I would call it, I heard from some members of the Senate was that it wasn't so much that they disputed or had any particular objection to this reduction to 7% as a target rate. They indicated it was the way in which it came about. They just didn't feel like that there was a lot of transparency involved for what that's worth, or that it kind of got sprung on them.
Well, I think they're exactly right. And one of the reasons that it received some criticism is that our rate of return had averaged way above that.
Yeah.
So a number of the legislators, and I would throw myself in that category, I was surprised too, in that why are we doing this now?
Yeah.
You know, our rate of return, to me at the time, did not indicate that it was necessary. And Randy McCoy, who is very verbal, let everybody knows what he's thinking, you know, he voted against the action to reduce that rate of return for that very reason. So I think that's a big part of why everybody just all of a sudden sat up and went, what's going on here?
Yeah. And Mr. McCoy testified to that effect.
That's correct.
In the Senate hearing, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
So, all right, so here we are. We've got an actuary who says, the PERS actuary says, you guys need to not only increase the employer contribution rate, but you might need to think about getting the legislature to inject some general fund monies into the plan as well, maybe some combination. I guess where I'm going is I wonder if we couldn't work out some sort of compromise here. You know, as we talked about, only the legislature can adjust benefits. I've said on the program before, I think if they started amending benefits, that might trigger some legal action on the part of the PERS membership. That'd be a problem.
Very much could.
And I honestly have said I think the state of Mississippi would lose in court, lose that case.
I think you're right.
Well,
and I hope we don't have to go that route.
I do too. I'm not wanting to say that. Go ahead, Ed.
Sam and I were talking to the speaker in the green room before we came in here with you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm kind of the way Speaker White is, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that during the appropriations process, they're going to come up with a chunk of money to infuse into PERS. Now, how much money is that going to be? You know, how long is it going to help?
Yeah.
How's the actuary going to react to that? I don't know the answer to those questions, but any amount of money that is infused into the PERS system is a positive step.
Senator Parker implied as much yesterday in his statement. I think you probably saw that.
Yeah,
right.
Is that the guys? Is that the way you guys read it?
That's
I don't know
what I
that he
read from
said
his
it directly like that, but it certainly implied that.
That's the optimism part of it.
Okay, I got you. Yes, sir.
You know, the retirees, I communicate with retirees a lot.
Yes, sir.
Social media. They want to hear those words of encouragement. You know,
sure.
I hear a lot from our retired teachers. That's the largest group we've got out there. And some of these retired teachers, some of them are 85, 90 years old. I get calls at night. Sam, are you going to let them take my retirement benefit? No, ma'am. Everything's working out. We're going to work that out. But it is a big point of concern, and I think this can help bring some peace of mind to our recipients, because for a lot of them, they don't have any other retirement income other than this and a little Social Security. That's it.
I can pass on that I have visited with numerous legislators about this, and I've asked them the question directly, would you support any kind of modifications to benefits? Not a single one would. And I've made that clear over and over again. They have no interest in doing so. But on the other hand, we got a problem we got to fix.
We got to address it.
I wonder, however, if you guys may have seen that the PERS organization worked with the actuaries to produce what's called a regression analysis. It's just a number of different scenarios that you could undertake, like increasing the employer rate, freezing the cost of living adjustment, and doing that every other year, reducing it, all kinds of different scenarios, and what the effect would be on the funding ratio. But some of that would, of course, like the cost of living adjustment, involve modification of benefits. Do you think there's any interest on the part of the membership? How about increasing the employee contribution rate? I know nobody wants any more money coming out. And the law says if you do that, you also got to adjust the benefits. You'd have to change the law so that you could increase the employer rate. So that would go to addressing the unfunded. Is there any interest, I guess, on the part of the PERS members to do anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Considering the fact that we're already one of the highest rates of contribution on behalf of the employee right now, and I don't hear that. Now, on the other hand, this business of a compromise you mentioned, maybe with the employer contribution mixed with the cash infusion, there might be some more discussion about that. I think it was back in 2017 when you mentioned the fact that the actuary had worked with the PERS staff. They put together a white paper back in 2017, gave it to the members of the legislature, saying, here are the different routes you could go to accomplish it. Didn't get much done then. But, Gerard, this discussion's been going on since the days of Haley Barber, really. I mean,
that's right.
And it's time for them to address this. And I think, as I mentioned to the Speaker, and he was in agreement with what I said, Mr. Speaker, it's time for us to do the right thing. And he agrees with that, I think. And I hope we can do that.
He does. I think it's fair to say, though, I agree with you, that it's had some off and on intermittent discussion, but nothing is consistent. I think nothing is broad and wide. Maybe to some extent, social media's played a role in that. We got a lot more people involved in that, but and it seems like everybody's got every legislator's phone number, and those guys are getting they're getting bombarded. Some of them have showed me their phones just page after page after page, and it's PERS members that are rightfully concerned.
And you're right, social media's played a role. About 20,000 people out there that look at what we put out there every day, and about 4,000 or 5,000 trying to join right now. So.
They're getting hammered at home.
I understand. And so I can tell you they're concerned about whatever moves to make, but they know they got to do something. If you guys can hang around, we can keep talking about this. You good to go?
Yeah.
You good to stay? All right. Thank you. We got Sam Valentine and Ed Legrand. They are on the board of the Mississippi Retired Public Employees Association. We got the great Steve Perry bumping us out here on Middays, coming right back in the Element Well studio. We're chatting with Sam Valentine and Ed Legrand from the Mississippi Retired Public Employees Association, talking about PERS. So, Sam, you were sharing with me something interesting off the air as to you worked, you're retired, you're enjoying your retirement years, drawing benefits out. Why do you stay involved? Why do you stay in this deal?
That's a good question. I mean, I could be at home getting my fishing gear ready for whenever this rain finally goes away, but I'm here talking to you, and I'll be here as long as I need to be, trying to protect our retirement system. And the reason is because over my years of service, and while I actually was involved with the retirement system, I took the time to get to know a lot of the people that are in our system. The largest group, of course, are our teachers, and they have a big responsibility. The average citizen doesn't realize what goes on inside that classroom. I was recently in a classroom of a teacher working with special needs kids in a SPED class, and after about 15 minutes of me standing there looking around the room and watching the dynamics of what was going on, I said, goodness gracious, how do they do this every day? It's an amazing challenge. But we got teachers that are dedicated that do it. Moving on down the road, let's talk about those folks that work in the Department of Corrections. I've had the privilege of actually seeing the inside of our prisons and what they do in there. And I can imagine a life of being a correction officer where you walk into a prison where you're locked in when you get there and you don't come out till they unlock the door and let you out. And you're sitting there looking at 75 or 80 convicted felons, and you got to keep your eye on them 24/7. Those kind of jobs, we kind of forget we got people out there doing that. Our guys on the highway department that patch the roads. Our foresters. Foresters are a big part of Mississippi industry, agricultural industry, and they get help from the State Department of Forestry, helping them define their needs of that forest. The list goes on and on. So knowing that these people are out there and the services they render, and they don't look at big raises, they don't look at a chance of opportunities to move up the ladder. They enjoy what they do. They know they're helping their state, and they just keep working and doing their job. And the one shining star in their employment package is the retirement system. And when I realized that, I said, we got to stand up for those folks. We got to keep it doing what it's doing. And when you look at the size of the number of working employees and the retirees, the system impacts over 300,000 lives. And that's a big deal, in my opinion. And it's worth people like me and Ed taking some of our retirement time to help keep an eye on what's going on and doing what we got to do to help these guys out.
So, Ed, I got to tell you, I've never heard anybody actually say, I agree with you, Sam, just to let you know, I'm very grateful for the service provided by the public sector workers, and I shared with you offline that my daughter is one, and of course, I believe you have one as well. So, and gosh, there's probably nobody out there listening that doesn't know somebody that works in the public sector in the state of Mississippi and has some sort of connection and relationship. So I've not heard anybody say that they begrudge that. It's the question of what do we do to solve this problem. I'll sum it up this way. The legislature, it just feels like it lacks total confidence in the PERS board. The PERS board and the membership clearly don't trust the legislature. The municipal leaders say we can't absorb an increase that the PERS board put on us with respect to this employer contribution, and the taxpayers are saying, I don't want to bail out PERS. The end result of that, punt. That kind of feels like what we've been doing for several years, if not a couple of decades.
That's right. That's right.
So here we are, Ed. We got to get everybody around the table, I feel like, and work through this this problem.
Yeah, I think that's the first step. Let everybody sit down together, air their concerns, their criticisms, and let's see if we can't come up with a manageable problem. But as we have all discussed in the past, and we'll discuss it again in the future, it's going to take some money to solve the problem. How much money is yet to be determined. What's the market going to be doing? I had somebody ask me the question the other day, well, what does the future of PERS look like? And I said, well, your guess is as good as mine. And I'm optimistic that it has a bright future. I don't see that we're going to be changing benefits, but, something needs to be done to deal with the unfunded liability. And, one of the issues, too, with the unfunded liability, there's a misconception about what it is.
Yeah.
The unfunded liability comes due if you shut the system down. And if you shut the system down and you're not making any more contributions into the system, both employee and employer, and your benefits on your return on investment are no longer going into the system, how long is that amount of money going to last, even to the tune of $33 billion, when you have a 26 billion unfunded liability? Well, it'll last for a while, but it's not going to last forever. So we need to come up with a long-term solution to the issue, and money's going to be part of it.
Yeah, 30 years is the information that I have from the PERS folks is when things really start to take hold and start falling apart, which means essentially that there's not any immediate risk. And we need to be clear on that. But the longer we don't take any action, the more severe are the consequences and more serious are the needs when we get to that point.
And it will be more and more expensive as time goes on.
Exactly. So we do need to, of course, clarify that we're not at that point, and that's not happening this year or next year. But we're on that path. And that's essentially what actuaries do, is project risk. Exactly. That's what they do. Exactly. So, and when you look at the unfunded liability, it's actually a little bit more involved than that. It's the present value of future revenues minus the present value of future expenses, future outlays, future benefits. And that's all done in some financial formulas. But nonetheless, it's a concern when you're sitting at 56%. The general standard is, though it's not etched in stone, is 80%. That's what we shoot for. And I think it was, 2001 or 2 time frame, the plan was sitting at over 70%. Yeah. So it's steadily decreased since then. One of those issues, of course, is we've shrunk the size of government. We got fewer people paying in. Right. We got more people who have gotten to that retirement age, and they're drawing benefits out. So those numbers are going in opposite directions, which puts pressure on the program.
That sounds real good when we talk about shrinking the size of government and shrinking budgets, but at the same time, this is a negative of that. And sometimes the way we go about doing that leaves our agencies a little bit in a quandary. But
that's right.
It is a negative from the standpoint of PERS.
So one thing that I wanted to get to as well, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here today, is there seems to be a wide perception, I'll call it a misconception. Ed, you and I were talking about it off the air, that the supplemental legislative retirement program, if we just got rid of that, that would solve all of PERS' problems. That's not true, as you know.
No, it's not. The special legislative retirement plan is just a blip on the screen. You're not talking about much money given the size of the portfolio. But you know what it is? It's something you just can't explain to people.
Yeah.
Why do they have it? Why don't I?
Yeah.
I think that one of the big complaints that I hear about that is the formula for calculating benefits is different for a legislator than it would be for a person working in any other entity. But as Ed said, when you look at it, when you compare it with the whole size of the fund, it's a small blip on the screen. That if you did away with it in the morning, it wouldn't move the unfunded liability 1 iota.
$20 million.
Yeah, that's not my concern. My concern is keeping this system funded for those people I mentioned a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Our school teachers, our people who are working in our prison systems, our highway department guys, our highway patrol. I want to keep those guys funded. Our law enforcement in general. I mean, they all need a pension plan. And these guys, you know, they don't have a savings plan. They don't make enough money to put a big savings account. This is their whole life as far as retirement, and they depend on it vigorously. And I think that's the reason that they did not stay involved. We know what it means to them.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that dissolving the SLRP program is not going to fix the PERS.
It won't.
I believe that we should, honestly, and I share with you guys, and I've been wide open with the legislature that members that I think you guys ought to fund those who are vested in the program, make sure they're taken care of, refund everybody that's not vested yet, and just shut the program down so we can focus totally on the bigger issue, which is PERS. Just take it out of the discussion altogether.
On the other side of that, I kind of like having them in there with me because
well, they still could participate in PERS. I don't have a problem with that. Just get rid of the supplemental program. Because a lot of the complaints you hear is, why do they get a second when we don't have it? I know you guys have
we
heard
hear
all
it,
that.
man. Yes, we hear it.
So I'm on record as recommending to the legislature, many of them are listening, you guys need to go ahead and phase out the SLRP program. Let's go focus on PERS.
You know, speaking of the legislature,
now we got to go.
One of the things that I have learned through this process of this particular piece of legislation, I have seen some legislators become educated in a short period of time.
No doubt about it.
And I'm glad that's happened. I'm sorry that we haven't done a better job of educating them. I think our board, our PERS board, has learned a lot from this.
We got to go. Okay. Sam, Ed, agree. Appreciate you guys coming in.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir. We appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.